My parents secretly created a spreadsheet to phase me out while investing everything in my younger brother, but when he finally confessed the truth and showed me their messages, I realized they had been sabotaging my entire life for years. I used to think you could hear favoritism. Not see it, hear it. In our house it sounded like my dad's voice when he said my brother's name, bright, punchy, as if he just remembered a winning lottery number. And when he said mine, it was like a cough he was trying to hide. I'm Alex. My brother, Jason, is 13 months younger and somehow light years ahead in our parents' eyes. He runs varsity, shakes hands like a senator, smiles like a toothpaste ad. I'm the kid who bags groceries after school, studies until my eyes blur, and flinches when the floor creaks because I never know if that means a lecture is coming. I'm not dramatic by nature. I like quiet. I like math because numbers don't sigh when you enter a room. The night everything started sliding had nothing special about it. Chicken thighs. Roasted carrots. Jason telling a story about a coach who said he had Captain Energy. Mom laughed like she'd heard the punchline before. Dad topped off Jason's water and, without looking at me, said, "We may need to concentrate resources where they'll pay off." I speared a carrot so hard it skidded across the plate. What does that mean? Scholarships, Dad said. Training. Tutoring. We can't fund everything for both of you. Jason's opportunities are, frankly, more realistic. Jason kept his eyes on his plate. He doesn't always gloat on purpose. Sometimes he's just not brave enough to disagree. Mom did her supportive spouse face. "You could focus on work, honey," she said to me. "There are great trade programs. Honest living," she said, honest like everything else was a scam. My fork shook. I hid it by pretending to adjust my napkin. "I have a 3.9 GPA. Dad waved a hand. "Jason's is higher, and he has leadership. People like him." It's bizarre what your brain reaches for when your dad calls your life a bad investment. Mine went hunting for all the evenings I'd spent at the kitchen table tutoring Jason in algebra, the times I'd picked up extra shifts so I could buy my own laptop, the early mornings I ran the track with headphones because the only place I felt important was in the rhythm of my feet hitting the lane lines. After dinner I went to my room and lay on my bed staring at the dark. If my heartbeat had a caption, it would have read, "Don't be crazy, you're overreacting." But 2 nights later, I was in the hall getting water and paused when I heard voices in the living room. "We can't keep pouring money into both," Dad said, low and calm. "Alex will be fine," Mom replied in that soothing way people talk to each other when they're ironing out the logistics of someone else's life. "He can work full-time, take a class or two." Jason's voice, softer. He'll be mad. "He'll adapt," Dad said. "Or he won't. Either way, we don't coddle weakness." I pressed my toes into the carpet so I'd feel something besides the tilt of the world. The next morning at school, my friend Nate slid into the seat across from me at lunch and said, "You're doing that thing with your face." "What thing?" "The one where your eyebrows look like they're trying to text 911. He peeled his orange with unnecessary precision. "Tell me." I told him part of it. Not the living room strategy session. I wasn't ready to say those words out loud. I told him quotas and leadership and how my achievements were just rehearsals for Jason's performance. Nate listened like a person who'd learned what to do with a fragile thing. "Document it," he said finally. "Not because you're going to court tomorrow. Because when you start doubting yourself, and you will, you'll need receipts." It sounded melodramatic. It also sounded like something to do besides cry. That night, when Mom yelled at me for slamming my door, I hadn't. Our house settles like a 90-year-old. I pressed record on my phone and slid it under a hoodie. It captured a lot. Dad's lecture on respect, Jason's stage whispered "Stop being a victim," the metallic ring my voice gets when I'm trying not to break. I named the file door 1 and stuck it in a folder labeled with the most boring title I could think of, Receipts. Once you start noticing, patterns multiply. Mail addressed to me disappeared. Jason mentioned a college info night I'd never heard about. Dad took him and called it boys' time. Mom gave Jason gas money and told me that work would build character. When I got an A on my calc midterm, she said, "That's great. Jason got an A+ last year." When Jason forgot to pick me up after my shift and I walked home in the rain, Dad asked why I hadn't planned better. I repeated Nate's advice to myself like a prayer: record, save, breathe. The first time I caught something concrete, it wasn't because I was clever. It was because Jason got careless. We share a bathroom with a door that sticks. He doesn't always close it all the way. I was brushing my teeth when I heard his phone ding and watched him glance at it and look guilty in the mirror. I spat, wiped my mouth, and said lightly, "Who's that?" "Coach," he said, too quickly. A minute later he left his phone on the counter, face down. I wouldn't have looked. I swear I wouldn't have. But the screen lit up with a second message and a name that scrolled into view before the lock engaged. Dad. I didn't see the text then. I only saw his face. And I recognized the expression from childhood, the one he wore when he broke my Lego tower and said it made more sense that way. That night I lay awake so long the stars outside my window drifted like lazy ships. Around 2 a.m., I got up, opened my laptop, and poked around the family Google Drive, not the shared photos where Mom posted vacation pictures with captions like blessed, but the quiet folder where Dad stores tax docs. There was a spreadsheet in there I'd never noticed before. Its title made my skin go cold: Resource Allocation, Sons. I clicked. Columns. Rows. Our names across the top. Color-coded cells. Under Jason, green blocks labeled training, travel, test prep, network. Under Alex, gray blocks labeled minimal support, part-time work, vocational track. Notes section, maintain family narrative of temper/immaturity to explain reduced investment. A bullet point that said limit distractions, for example, remove room as study space if necessary. At the bottom, a line item, like an afterthought, if resistance escalates, consequences. The numbers blurred. I took screenshots when my hand stopped shaking. I saved them to receipts, then saved them again to a drive with a fake name. Then I sat on my floor in the dark and tried to figure out what to call the thing that happens when someone who's supposed to love you turns your future into a budget cut. The next day, I told Nate. He swore so quietly it sounded like a prayer. Bring it to my cousin, he said. Marina. She's in law school and mean in the ways we need. We showed her on a Sunday afternoon while her cat watched from the back of the couch like a judge. Marina didn't gasp or say oh my god. She asked for dates. Times. Context. Think of this as a timeline, she said, tapping her pen. We're not building an explosion. We're building a map. I was halfway through telling her about the college info night when my phone buzzed with a calendar reminder I didn't remember setting. Volunteer shift, Saturday, 6 p.m. I never volunteered Saturdays. I opened the details. It had been added from the family account. Notes field, Alex committed to help Jason with practice transportation. It wasn't even clever. It was just presumptive. Of course you'll be available to be a cog in this machine. I added a screenshot to receipts and tried not to cry. Dad's version of escalation arrived 2 days later in a text that read like a performance review. Moving your desk to the garage to give your mother some space. You chose to work there. I walked home to find my door off its hinges and my walls naked except for shadow rectangles where posters used to hang. My blue track metal dangled on a nail in the garage above the lawnmower, right next to a faded measuring tape. The air smelled like oil and grass clippings and humiliation. Stop crying, Jason said from the doorway, not unkindly. He looked at the metal, then away. It's just a room. It was a life, I said. We didn't talk about it that night. We didn't talk about it the next. We did the family thing where everyone pretends their house isn't on fire while they make tea. And then, because life doesn't care if you're drowning, other things happened. A snow day. A pop quiz. An old woman at my job who told me I packed her bread wrong and then slipped a butterscotch candy into my palm like a curse. The person who broke the silence wasn't me. It was Jason. He showed up at Nate's 2 weeks later in a hoodie with the strings chewed and eyes that wouldn't sit still. Can I come in? Nate stepped aside. We sat in his kitchen because living rooms felt too human for what we were about to do. Jason didn't touch the glass of water he asked for. He held it like he might throw it at his own reflection. They made me do it, he said finally, looking at the table. Dad said you were unfocused. That you needed to find your lane. He said a little failure would teach you discipline. So he told me to. Keep you busy. To make sure you miss things. He said we couldn't carry you. He told you to sabotage me, I said. My voice sounded like someone else's. Jason didn't deny it. He pulled out his phone with hands that shook. I saved the texts, he said. The first message from Dad read, make sure Alex knows you need him Saturday, he can't handle both work and school. The second, we'll handle his whining, your job is to win. I felt something crack in my chest in a way that, stupidly, made me think of ice on a pond. You tell yourself you're safe because you've crossed this way before. Then one day, under the same sky, you're on your back staring up at a hole you fell through. We sat with the text between us like a live wire. Nate said practical things about backing up files and chain of custody. Marina asked if we'd consider putting changes in writing, no more educational interference, no more room changes without consent, phrases that sounded like a very polite way of saying stop treating your son like a lab rat. I nodded in all the right places. I felt none of it in my body. Jason spoke again only when his phone buzzed with a name that made him flinch. Morgan, he said. His girlfriend. Quiet. Smarter than both of us in the way that counts, the kind of quiet that makes you listen when she does speak. Jason answered on speaker. Her voice shook. Your parents called me, she said without hello. They said they'd handle things. I told them they wouldn't. I'm not coming over anymore. What did they say they'd handle? I asked, though I already knew from the silence that followed. There's a rumor people say when they don't know what else to say, babies fix families. They don't. Responsibility doesn't make people kinder, sometimes it just gives them more to control. Morgan took a breath and said the thing out loud. And suddenly the spreadsheet wasn't the worst plan in that house. We made another plan. Not a heroic one. A survival one. Get Morgan to a clinic where information came without strings. Loop in an adult who hadn't failed us, Ms. Durham. Create a paper trail for me that meant my mail belonged to me and my grades couldn't be reconsidered into something easier for the family story. Don't meet in their house, meet in a neutral space. Bring people who wouldn't flinch when Dad raised his voice. Nate's mom, Elena, volunteered her kitchen table for the night before prep and her glare for the day of meeting. I've done divorce mediations with less caffeine, she said, brewing another pot. You kids don't go anywhere alone. We talk through everything. If anyone tries to steamroll, I'll park my maternal self in front of the bulldozer. I made a list because lists feel like control. 1. Back up everything. 2. Email the registrar. 3. Change the mailing address for scholarship offices to school. 4. Bring the medal, not because it mattered legally, but because I couldn't stand the idea of it hanging above the lawnmower like it had never been mine. We did the clinic first. A waiting room with a plant that looked too dusty to be alive. A nurse who explained options without looking at our faces like she was reading from a script she'd written herself. Morgan asked 3 questions and then one very brave one. Does my choice have to include his parents? The nurse shook her head. It includes the people you choose. Morgan cried hard into a paper towel and then stopped like she'd decided not to drown in front of strangers. I told Ms. Durham about the spreadsheet. She pressed her lips together the way people do when they're tucking anger behind their teeth, then made 3 phone calls that sounded like magic spells. When I left her office, my student file had a note that said no changes without student consent, and my scholarship mail was rerouted through her. They can't starve you of information anymore, she said, handing me a sticky note with her cell number and the sentence, if they try to drag you into a car, call me first, then the police. Saturday came. The community center's room B had a coffee-stained carpet and a buzzing light that gave everyone bad skin in the reflection of the window. Marina sat at the end of the folding table with a yellow legal pad. Elena flanked the middle like a bodyguard disguised as somebody's mother. Ms. Durham balanced a slim folder on her knee. Nate took the seat beside me and put his foot against mine under the table like an anchor. My parents arrived on time. Of course they did. Punctuality is their religion. Dad wore a suit he saves for presentations. Mom clutched her purse like it might tell her what to think. Jason sat at the far end with shoulders up around his ears. Morgan slipped in quietly and took the chair to his right, hands folded small in her lap. No one shook hands. No one said good morning. It was the kind of silence that buzzes. Marina opened her pad and spoke clearly enough to make the buzzing light feel shy. This meeting is to establish boundaries and end ongoing interference in Alex's education and life, she said. This is not a courtroom. But the facts are going to matter. Dad smiled in a way that wasn't one. We're happy to discuss reasonable expectations with our son. She turned the spreadsheet face up. Great, she said. Let's start with this. Mom's breath hitched. Dad's face didn't move. You took a private document, he said finally. You made your child a line item, Elena replied, and I loved her more than I'd thought possible. For a second, just a second, I thought maybe this would go like the movies. Maybe Dad would look at the paper and say, what have I become? Maybe he'd cry. Maybe Mom would take my hand. Instead, Dad did what he's always done. He explained. Budgets. Reality. We have finite resources, he said, like a CEO telling the staff about layoffs. Tough choices have to be made. Tough for whom? I asked, and chosen by who? He didn't answer me. He leaned past Marina and spoke to Jason instead. You don't have to be here for this, he said. You have more important things to focus on. Jason didn't look at him. He reached for Morgan's hand like he'd been practicing in his head all morning and said, I am exactly where I need to be. And for the first time in my life, watching my brother not flinch, I wondered if maybe the sound favoritism makes when it breaks is quiet. Not a crash. Just the soft click of someone choosing differently. Marina slid a letter across the table. Here are the boundaries, she said. All mail addressed to Alex goes to Alex, through the school if necessary. No changes to his living space without written consent. No interference with school events, deadlines, or financial accounts. Communication will be in writing. If harassment continues, we will file for a protective order. If documents in his name are withheld, we will seek legal remedy. You will sign this today. Dad looked at the paper as if it were written in a language he hated. Mom looked at me like she was trying to find the baby I used to be inside the person in front of her and couldn't. No one picked up a pen. I thought that would be the moment I broke. It wasn't. The moment I broke happened after, in the parking lot, sun too bright, asphalt radiating heat even though it was spring. My phone buzzed. An email from a scholarship committee I didn't know had ever received my application. We'd like to schedule your interview. Please confirm availability. The original message, it turned out, had been sent 3 weeks ago. It had been forwarded from the family account to junk and then buried. I stared at the screen, and the whole last month clicked into place like a horrible lock. The missing mail, the new calendar appointments I hadn't made, the lecture about realistic paths. It wasn't just that they'd invested in Jason. It was that they'd actively withdrawn from me and rebranded theft as parenting. Nate looked at my face and didn't ask. He read the email over my shoulder and said, we're going to reply yes. He took my phone when my hands wouldn't cooperate, typed the word, and hit send. Behind us, the community center door creaked. I didn't turn. I didn't need to see Dad's expression to know which one he was wearing. I knew them all. What I didn't know, standing in that hard little square of sun with my best friend's shoulder against mine and my brother's girlfriend wiping her eyes on her sleeve, was how we were going to get from here to something like a life. I only knew this. I had a date for an interview they hadn't planned for me to have, a document on a folding table with expectations they hadn't planned to be held to, and a line in a spreadsheet I could no longer unknow. The rest would be part 2, whatever that meant, whatever it cost. We sent the reply, yes, I'm available, and I watched Nate's thumb tap send like it was a detonator. Nothing blew up. Nothing changed. The parking lot still smelled like hot tar. The community center's buzzing light still made everyone look queasy. But the word yes went somewhere my parents hadn't planned for, and that felt like the first right-sized miracle I'd had in months. Marina gathered her papers, slid the boundary letter into a manila envelope, and said she'd email a PDF that night. Elena squeezed my shoulder in that mother of all mothers way and walked us to her car. Jason and Morgan followed behind, arms brushing like they were trying to learn how to hold a future without dropping it. Dad didn't say goodbye. He stood by the door and stared at the glass as if he could see a different ending through it. We didn't go home. We went to Elena's kitchen because that's where victories belong. She put water on for pasta like centuries of women before her had done when their kids came back from something hard. Morgan sat at the table turning her phone over and over. Jason helped set plates like a person counting to 10. Nate texted his group chat "We're alive," and people responded with confetti emojis because sometimes group chats understand the assignment. The scholarship office sent a calendar invite 30 minutes later. Interview Wednesday. 2 days. Ms. Durham replied to my forward with 4 thumbs up and I'll book a quiet room. She also attached a mock interview sheet she'd made for her seniors, sample questions, notes about staying specific, reminders that you're allowed to be proud without apologizing for it. I read that line 10 times. Allowed is a fragile door you don't realize you can open until someone tells you it isn't locked. At midnight, after the dishes were stacked and the kitchen smelled like basil and dish soap, Elena pointed all of us toward sleep. I lay on Nate's floor staring at glow-in-the-dark stars he'd stuck up when we were 12. My phone buzzed once. A number I knew too well. Your behavior today was unnecessary and cruel. Family matters are not for public arenas. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Marina, turned the phone face down, and counted the star clusters until I lost track. Tuesday was prep. Ms. Durham ran me through questions with a seriousness that made me feel like I was worth the time. Describe a challenge and how you addressed it, she said. I could have said the spreadsheet. I could have said the garage. Instead I said, when our calc teacher had to leave mid-year, a bunch of us were floundering. I organized a peer study group. We split topics and taught each other, and I made review sheets. The pass rate jumped. It taught me that when systems wobble, people can be scaffolding. Ms. Durham's mouth tilted into a half smile I was going to print and put on a wall inside my chest. Why our program? She asked next. I took a breath. Because I want the kind of mentorship I didn't have at home. I want to learn how to build things that work, and then go back and build them in the places they don't. She nodded. We practiced eye contact. We practiced not apologizing. We practiced breathing like oxygen was free. On the way out she handed me a sticky note with a doodle of a ladder and the words one rung at a time. It shouldn't have helped. It did. Marina, meanwhile, turned our boundary letter into something with teeth. She CC'd my parents on every email to the district liaison, the registrar, and, cruel in its precision, the family accountant. Transparency is a disinfectant, she said, sipping Elena's stale coffee like it was a weapon. When Dad replied with a paragraph of executive phrasing about keeping channels private, Marina sent a single sentence back: all education-related communications for Alex must be in writing and copied to council. I printed it. I don't know why. Maybe because paper feels real, and reality had been slippery lately. Jason and Morgan had their own list. Elena drove them to a clinic 2 towns over where the receptionist didn't clock their ages like a security guard. A social worker set out pamphlets and said, the choice is yours, and for the first time since everything started, I watched Jason be quiet in a way that looked like learning, not retreat. They didn't decide that day. They gathered information. They made a follow-up. They ate French fries in the car and cried once at a red light and lived. Wednesday came like the first page of a book you want to read slowly. I wore Nate's one decent blazer and a tie Elena tied for me twice because my hands didn't listen. Ms. Durham booked the counseling room with the good window. We tested the Wi-Fi, the webcam, the mic. She put a glass of water on a coaster and said, you have more than one story. The interviewers were 2 women and a man with soft voices and not soft eyes. They asked the questions Ms. Durham had practiced into my bones and a few she hadn't. When one asked about adversity at home, I didn't say spreadsheet, I said, sometimes the people you love can't see the shape of you. I learned to draw it myself. When another asked, what do you want to study? I said applied math, which sounded like a joke after the last month, so I added, I like finding the variables you can change and the ones you can't. When it ended, the 3 of them smiled in the way grown-ups do when they've decided something and aren't telling you yet. I logged off and sat in silence while my heart wrote a drum solo. Ms. Durham knocked, peeked in, and raised her eyebrows like punctuation. I nodded. She did a tiny fist pump that I think broke some school counselor guideline and I loved her for it. We celebrated with grocery store cupcakes on Elena's porch because sometimes the right ritual is cheap sugar under a sky that refuses to pick a weather. Jason split his with Morgan and then gave her the bigger half. I pretended not to see it. The email came Friday at 3:14 p.m. My hands shook so badly I read it out loud because it was the only way to force the letters into sense. We are pleased to offer you the Harbor Scholarship. Full ride. Stipend. Mentorship program. I made a sound like a sob and a laugh got into a car crash. Lena, who'd edited my essays in a marathon session a month back, screamed through the phone. Ms. Durham wrote in all caps, which I'd never seen her do. Nate picked me up and spun me once even though his shoulder's been bad since that time he tried to skateboard down the library ramp. Then my phone buzzed again. Dad, congratulations. I assume you'll behave maturely moving forward. Which, God, If you've never had someone try to rename your win as a ceasefire, you wouldn't know how fast joy can trip. I typed 10 replies. I deleted 11. Marina texted, "Do not reply. Let the paper trail speak." We let it speak. The boundary agreement came back signed, Mom's signature careful, Dad's angled so hard it looked like he'd tried to cut the document in half with a pen. They'd added a comment about reserving parental rights, which Marina redlined away with the efficiency of someone slicing a bad thread. Elena bought a cheap frame and we hung the signed page in Nate's hallway like a diploma from a school called Bare Minimum Human Respect. Saturday morning, proof of concept, a letter addressed to me, actually to me, arrived at Ms. Durham's office. She texted a photo of it sitting on her desk. I biked over in the wind that lives in our coastal town like an uninvited roommate, thanked her too many times, and read it in a chair by the window, an invitation to a summer bridge program for harbor scholars. Fieldwork. Stipend. Early move-in. I cried again, cleaner this time. Take the bridge, Ms. Durham said. You've been building your own. Let someone else lay planks for a while. Morgan told her parents that night. Jason went with her. Elena waited in the car in case that went badly. It didn't go well, exactly. There was shouting, a slammed door, someone said something unforgivable and then apologized, but when they came back out an hour later, Morgan's mom was holding a tissue like she'd wrung it out and Morgan was holding a brochure with a clinic's logo on it and her dad was holding the door. They didn't decide that night either. They decided to decide together, which is more than most people get. The week after, Dad tried one more thing. He called the school and asked for my complete financial records as head of household. A new registrar who didn't yet know our saga almost sent them. Ms. Durham intercepted like a goalkeeper and wrote back, "Student has designated self as the point of contact. Please see attached documentation." She CC'd Marina and me. The registrar apologized. I wrote back, "Thank you," and meant it in the way you mean it to a stranger who stood in front of a door just long enough for you to get through. "I'll have to get used to that," I said to Ms. Durham when I saw her next. "People helping me. That's the trick," she said, learning the difference between control and care. April turned into May. Solve for X, the student group we'd accidentally founded by sharing forms and help, kept humming. We met after school in the library on Tuesdays and built a list of small, concrete wins. A coach stopped doing punishment laps as public humiliation. A teacher started sharing lesson plans with the class after mid-semester feedback. A guidance office added office hours at lunchtime so kids who work after school wouldn't be invisible. None of it would trend. All of it made the day hurt less. Mom texted occasionally, messages that read like someone holding a baby bird and not sure if it was alive. "Dinner sometime? Saw a blue hoodie that looked like yours. Your grandmother asks about you." I answered in short sentences because my therapist, yes, I found one. Elena has a spreadsheet for everything, including counselors who take sliding scale payments, said I was allowed to draw the outline of what I could handle. Sometimes I didn't answer at all. Sometimes I did and then turned my phone off and went to the pier to watch the ocean chew on the horizon. Graduation came with a sky so blue it felt staged. Our gowns were the color of a bruise. Jason squeezed my shoulder in the lineup and said, "Proud of you." I looked at him hard enough to put a dent in the moment and said, "Me too." He'd gotten into a state school with a good program and a coach who seemed to treat boys like boys, not investments. Morgan stood with her parents in the crowd, her hand in her mom's hand. They'd made their decision quietly 2 weeks before and told almost no one. It isn't my story to narrate, but I will say this: love looks like a ride to an appointment and a pillow on the couch and a text that says whatever you pick, I'm here tomorrow. When they called my name, I walked like my feet belonged to me. Elena whooped like a woman who had sat through too many mediations to pretend this wasn't holy. Nate filmed on his phone, crying openly because he's constitutionally incapable of being cool. Ms. Durham dabbed her eyes with the sleeve of a cardigan that I swear has seen every kid who ever fell apart in her office. I shook the principal's hand and wanted to say thanks for not the other one, which is unfair. He'd retired. The new principal liked sunlight and student councils. After the ceremony, Dad stood at the edge of the chaos like a man trying to identify a song he used to know. He lifted a hand. I lifted mine back. We didn't walk toward each other. I don't know what to call that. Truce? Weather? The space between what happened and what might. Packing for harbor felt like playing Tetris with your entire past. Elena gave me boxes. Nate made a spreadsheet of things we swear you need in a dorm and populated it with entries like mug you won't mind losing and power strip you will share like a saint. Jason brought over my track medal, the one I'd taken out of the garage and stuffed in a drawer and then forgotten because sometimes winning small is all you can afford. He bought a cheap shadow box. It looked ridiculous and perfect. 2 days before move-in, an email landed from Dad with a subject line that made my stomach hurt: financial lessons. I almost didn't open it. I did. It read like an apology written by a man who only knows how to apologize to a ledger. I believed I was doing what would maximize outcomes. I understand now I harmed you. I will not interfere with your education. I will transfer what remains of the $529 to your account. There was a PDF attached with a wire confirmation, and a sentence that said, I don't expect forgiveness. I closed my laptop and went and stood in Elena's kitchen until the smell of garlic and tomatoes convinced me the world still contained good things. Move-in day was chaos plus stairs. Harbor's dorms have that film of new old on everything. Fresh paint over tired cinder block, cables zip tied to radiators, windows that stick unless you bribe them with a flat palm and a curse. Nate carried the heaviest box because he lied about his shoulder. Elena shamed an RA into finding an extra cart for us. Ms. Durham texted a photo of a tiny potted plant she'd left with the front desk, for your window, water it when you remember. Jason installed my power strip like it was a crown jewel. Morgan wrote Alex in block letters on my laundry bag because she said ownership is a spell. When they left, I lay on my narrow bed and listened to a hallway full of strangers be young. Someone down the hall played a song I've always hated, and it sounded like freedom. I got up, took the plant out of its paper bag, and set it on the sill. I named it Ledger because I'm petty and I like a joke with teeth. Orientation week was a blur of maps and names and the dizzying realization that no one here knew the version of me that had been budgeted out of his life. In the first advising session, the counselor said, "What do you want to build?" And I didn't freeze. I said, "Safety nets that look like spreadsheets but behave like people," and watched her tilt her head in the way that means go on. On Thursday, there was a welcome lecture in a small auditorium that smelled like dust and ambition. A professor with white hair and the posture of a lighthouse said, "Applied math is the art of choosing variables," and I wrote it down like scripture. Halfway through, my phone buzzed in my pocket with a local number I didn't know. I let it buzz. I wrote choose variables again because sometimes you have to repeat the truths you want to keep. After, in the bright slam of afternoon, I sat on the campus lawn with a plate of free pizza and texted the people who'd carried me, a photo of Ledger thriving, a photo of my student ID, a photo of the shadow box on a shelf looking like a contraband memory. Responses came back fast, a string of heart emojis from Elena, "You're gonna be obnoxious about math now, aren't you?" from Nate, a soft proud of you from Ms. Durham that I screenshotted and saved next to the old ones because you have to archive the good like you once archived the bad. Jason texted a photo too, him in a cheap apartment kitchen, a pot of rice on the stove, Morgan laughing off frame. "It's not fancy," he wrote, "but it's ours." Then, after a few dots, "Thank you for not giving up on me when I deserved it." I stared at the words until they settled into a shape that didn't cut. That night, I walked the quad under string lights that made everything look like a cliché I didn't mind living inside. I thought about the spreadsheet in the garage and the community center and the word yes going where it wasn't supposed to go. I thought about the noise and the quiet and the way help had shown up like a bridge I hadn't known to ask for. Reddit would want a twist here, some shocking last text or a secret revealed. Real life gave me something simpler. The next morning, I woke up to an email from Harbor's mentorship director. "You've been paired with an alumni mentor. She grew up nearby and built education tech tools for districts. She asked to work with you. Coffee next week?" I laughed, out loud, messy. I pictured a ladder, Ms. Durham's doodle. One rung at a time. Then I got up, watered Ledger, answered the email, and walked to my first class on time because sometimes the plot is just you choosing the next right step without asking anyone if you're allowed. There are still nights when I dream about my old room and walk in to find a desk with sawdust instead of a chair. There are mornings when I pick up my phone and feel my chest tighten like I'm bracing for a message that will yank the floor out. But fewer. And softer. Healing, it turns out, is a spreadsheet too, columns labeled today and not today, cells filled in slow with routines and laughter and an RA who knocks when your music is too loud and a best friend who sends you memes at 2 a.m. because he knows you're pretending you're not scared. It adds up. If you want a moral, here's mine: love isn't a budget. People aren't line items. And no one gets phased out quietly if you learn how to say yes where someone wrote no in a cell you never saw. When I call Elena on Sundays now, she always asks the same question before we hang up. "Do you have enough?" She means money, snacks, socks, courage. I always answer, "For today." And she always says, "Good. Today's the only column we get to fill."